Future.
That's sponsored by Remote HQ. Collaborate like you're in the same room. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. That's Remote HQ.
Back to the program. Today we are going to talk about a rather serious topic. The future. What does the future hold?
Turns the other party up like as high as it will go.
I'm up to 11.
You are, practically. You're practically up to 11. Shelly Brisbin is here with us, everybody. Shelly Brisbin, the host of Parallel.
There's always a pause, Ken. Always a pause.
Yes.
What is she the host of?
Well, no, I can't remember because I'm afraid now that it's not Parallel, it's Parallels. I know it's not either of those things.
Right. See, I know that. I know that you're not completely unaware of what I'm hosting, but I suspect that, like others, you don't know whether there's an S. Some people don't know whether there's a the or not because it used to have a the. It's
Yes.
just Parallel.
It's just Parallel. Okay. And for people who don't know, can you remind them what that is?
Is a tech podcast with accessibility sprinkles. We talk a lot about technology, sometimes more than others. We talk about accessibility. We try to mix those things up a little bit because they are and should be connected.
I got a question for you really quickly, and this is not one of the 3 questions, but you and I were joking about maybe I would throw you a curveball and ask you something completely like off topic. Maybe I should save this for another time, though. Because this whole thing
No,
started.
you started now. You have to.
I know. So this whole thing started because I jokingly said last Friday when Apple took over, or when Snoopy took over Apple's webpage because Apple was making a Peanut series. I jokingly said, well, we all knew when I started this show in 2006, this is obviously where we were going to end up, is a brand new Snoopy show from Apple.
Well, yeah,
because, who didn't see that coming? And yet I find myself thinking, okay, so the stuff that's on Apple TV Plus, there's like some really good, heartwarming modern day stuff, right? Sometimes it's a little blue, like on Mythic Quest Raven's Banquet. Sometimes it's just wonderful, like on Ted Lasso. And then the kids' things that they're doing, it's like, Stillwater, which is the thing with the panda bear that's teaching mindfulness to a bunch of kids. And that's cool. And they've got Ghost Writer. Ghost Writers, or Ghost Writer. I can't remember which. They got Fraggle Rock that they're going to be doing. They've got the Helpsters. What I found myself thinking, though, is all the future stuff from Apple, like, Foundation is going to be a tiny bit dystopian because that, of course, goes poorly. It comes out okay in the end. Spoiler alert, the books are like 60 years old. For All Mankind is rooted in, while it may end well as well, it's rooted in the conflict between the U.S. and the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union didn't fall in this alt history. They've got like all this wonderful, like nice modern day stuff. And then their future stuff is dystopian or bad. Meanwhile, the stuff that we're giving to kids doesn't even include technology, it seems. I'm thinking they should reboot the Jetsons.
I'd be down for that.
All right.
I absolutely would.
Okay.
Make that happen.
Either that or do Tomorrowland, the movie Tomorrowland.
Sure.
Wrest the control of that from Disney because, they did not do well with
Disney
the movie Tomorrowland.
won't miss it. They've got so much stuff.
Exactly. Besides,
just come over to the Disney lobby, open a briefcase, just put it in there, take it away.
Yeah, exactly. I'm liking that idea. Anything you want to see them do, or should we just get to today's questions?
I mean, I'm not prepped for that. I've always said, I think, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared. I've always felt like, I like a mix of a back catalog and a modern catalog. And yeah, they have back catalog with things like Peanuts, but they don't really have, and I guess I was putting my pundit hat on too. It was like, well, what does Apple TV need to survive?
Yeah.
But this sort of mix of the familiar and the new always appeals to me. So I guess I'd like to see them, whether they have to swipe it from Disney or buy it from somebody else, more stuff that's familiar to go with the new stuff. I like a mix.
All right. See, personally, I disagree with that. Just because, I think it's just a long game thing. I think in 5 years, they're going to have so much stuff that you won't even miss the stuff that you miss. And the other thing, though, and I hate to correct you, I think you're forgetting about Fraggle Rock.
Oh, yeah. So true. So true. Forgot about the Fraggles.
I understand. All right. So people who have been listening to the show this week know what the questions are. The questions are for people who haven't heard it this week. because this show, macOS Can, not this show, in a few minutes started a year ago, but macOS Can started 15 years ago. So we're working in 15-year increments. The question that I have for people is, what has Apple done that has wowed you in the last 15 years? What it has done that's most surprising in the last 15 years? And then we'll finally talk about, you just get to roam free, not what you think they're going to do necessarily. What would you like to see from Apple? Go aspirational if you want to in the next 15 years. But let's start with what's wowed you in the past 15.
I have to start from the point of view of somebody who actually held an Apple, what was it called? Now I can't even remember the name of the terrible phone they made before the iPhone.
Motorola Rocker.
The Rocker! I had somebody who held one of those in my hand, and at that point felt more low on Apple than I felt, back in the mid-90s. I was like, oh my God, please don't even do phones. Just don't,
right,
because why? And so it's not the easy answer, which is they introduced an iPhone and an iPhone was awesome. It's more that they introduced an iPhone, which was awesome, and they kept doubling and tripling down on it and making it inarguably better over generations. And how old that product is now. It's 14 years old, and it still continues to innovate. And you can argue about, where things come from in the beginning, but just that they've managed to franchise the heck out of that thing in terms of, making it continue to be as good as it is. I think that's pretty amazing. That's such a sustained product category for them that's impressive.
I'll tell you something else that's interesting to me about that in particular, because I ended up answering these questions just this way on Tuesday's macOS Can Live. And one of the things that I came across as far as answering the surprise question is how they've made us okay with prices going up on stuff to the point now that we think prices are reasonable. Like, a pair of AirPods, $150. And it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Well, it only makes sense because Apple did that. But here's tying back to what you were saying about the phone. You can get a MacBook Air for less than you can get an iPhone 12 Pro Max. And yet those don't seem ridiculous at this point. I mean, that the amount of power, the amount of stuff that they put in the phone. I mean, just the PR around pricing aside, what a phone does today compared to what a phone did when the first iPhone came out. And they were still pretty freaking expensive for phones at the time. But just you're right, as they double and triple down on what the phone can do. I mean, it's now to the point where how many Chromebooks could you get for the cost of one, iPhone 12 Pro Max? And yet you don't feel hosed by the price of the 12 Pro Max, I don't think.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say that I don't. I don't have a 12 Pro Max, and price is a very big reason.
Right, me neither.
For that.
Right.
I mean, Apple still charges really high prices because they could get away with it. And I take some small consolation in the fact that when the 10s came out and the 10R did so well, they kind of took a year where they didn't raise them as much as they were gonna, and they kept the 10R around, and they understand, and it may still make your point that what we call a value phone is still, $700 or $800, but they got their ears pinned back a little bit, and then they came back the next year even stronger. So it was like, all right, we're going to try again because we're Apple and we can. So if wow includes they charge really high prices and they can get away with it, I'll go with you there. But I'm not going to say, oh my God, isn't it great that they can charge? Because now we have this lovely metric, which I know you talk about on macOS Ken a lot, of the amount of money per iPhone that they make. I mean, It's just astonishing.
Yeah. I mean, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying, I'm going to get 6. It's just interesting to me. I guess what I'm saying is, well, I don't personally in my life think of an iPhone as being comparable to a MacBook Air, let's say. But I can see where you could make the case for the iPhone being a powerful enough device that it ought to be a computer priced thing. And again, I mean, the problem is you've got a bunch of other things too. Like I said, the $250 Chromebook blows all of the sort of the pricing out of the water, depending on what you want to use them for and what you want to do with them. I want to get on, though, to the fun stuff, because my thing about pricing was actually my surprise point that they've been able to sort of, we're the frogs in the water. And they've raised the temperature on us to the point that, oh, my goodness, look how much things are now compared to how much they were and how much we thought we'd be willing to pay. Right. Surprise. Yeah. Everything's expensive. I'm curious, what's been the surprise for you over the past 15?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to be on brand here because my surprise is the degree to which Apple has maintained both actual leadership and the perception of leadership in a thing they weren't doing very much at all before they started this 15 years ago, or actually 12 years ago, is accessibility. Because there was a dark period, and I don't have to go through all the history because I made a perfectly lovely documentary where you can hear all about it. But there was a period of time where Apple products were not focused at all on accessibility. They had been, they stopped. When the iPhone first came out, they weren't accessible at all for a whole 2 years. And then they just did this amazing thing where they didn't just say, here's a little bit of accessibility. They said, oh, here, we're going to throw the doors open wide to a brand new category of customers, people with blindness and visual impairments, and to some extent, people with hearing impairments. And we're going to make this the most accessible device out there by a long shot. And they've managed to keep the majority of that lead for all this time, even though companies like Google and Microsoft have made tremendous gains, and especially if you go to the computer side as well as the mobile side, they've made a lot of gains. But Apple built something which they have incrementally added on to that still maintains real leadership for people who are trying to decide what's the most accessible mobile device I can get out there. And as I say, that was not in Apple's DNA before. And as much as Apple would like you to think it was because of what a nice, awesome, friendly, progressive company they are, it wasn't.
Would you say that that's true across the board? You're thinking about iPhone specifically, or iPhone, iPad, Mac, all of it?
iPhone, anything with iOS, certainly. With the Mac, they had a lot of catch up to play, and they did in the early 2000s. They did the Mac before they did iOS, but Mac wasn't as ready for prime time when it first became accessible as iOS was when it did. So when they flipped the switch on the Mac, there were a lot of hobbyists, and it really was that way. One operating system, it wasn't accessible, and then one operating system it was. And when they flipped that switch on the Mac, it was a thing for hobbyists to sort of go, I wonder if this will work. And it was clearly inferior to offerings on the Windows side. But on iOS, first of all, because Apple already had a lead in smartphone-based operating systems as opposed to all the other kinds of phones that were semi-smart and not smart at all at the time, they had an advantage. But certainly in the mobile platforms, they've just really, they've stayed out ahead and done it by a long way.
Let me, I'm not pushing against, let me just, I guess what I'm wondering is, where is the surprise? Is the surprise that they were able to do it, or the surprise that they did?
The surprise that they did it kind of so quickly and all in, I mean, they obviously have made some incremental upgrades, as all platforms like this have happened. But the surprise was that their initial attempt was so on the mark, because they could have said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to help the blind folks out. We're going to help the folks with hearing impairment out, and we're going to give them a feature that sort of works a little bit. And if you hang out for a couple of years, maybe it'll get incrementally better. But what they did was they said, because there's a lot of artfulness and a lot of real smart engineering behind how VoiceOver, the screen reader in iOS, was created in the first place. So it was really usable when it first came out. And there were a lot of developers who either didn't have to do anything or very quickly figured out, oh, this is what I can do to make it work, that made a lot of apps accessible right away. So the surprise was that it started out so well. And I think it might have even surprised them. I'm sure there were people within the accessibility teams at Apple that were like, this is going to be good. But given the way that Apple initially rolled it out, I think it must have surprised Apple how important it was to that community. And then what they've been able to do over the course of many years is keep the level pretty high. As I say, they're not always ahead. They don't win everything, and there are things that are broken. But those are relatively minor quibbles. And what they did in 2009 by adding accessibility in one fell swoop that worked was they got a lot of people's attention, and they got a lot of people who were down on Apple to say, oh, wow, these guys are for real now.
It is the year 2036, or it will be in a moment. But first, a word from Remote HQ, letting you collaborate as if you are in the same room. Long time ago now, I went to another city, a couple of cities away. It took about an hour and a half to get there, and I was going there for a meeting, which, okay, we could have done over the phone, but I had handwritten notes I wanted people to see, and we wanted to be able to work together on a whiteboard. We might get together and do that socially today. The only thing is, we can't get together socially today because, we're social distancing. Here's the thing, though. We could still have that meeting with Remote HQ. Remote HQ gives your group access to the kind of things you'd have if you were in the same room. A whiteboard anybody can write on, a shared web browser anybody can control, notes that anybody can add to, plus access to the apps your team's already using, like Google Docs, Miro, Dropbox, and plenty of others. So even if you can't be together, you can work together like you're together. Try it out with your team. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. Give Remote HQ a try. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. So welcome to the far future sounding year 2036.
Yay!
We've had our second dog president, and who saw that coming?
I think the cat won, and I'm never going to acknowledge otherwise.
All right. We fixed global warming, so there's good
Yay.
news, too. Yeah, 2036 is really looking up. 15 years down the road. 2036 is 15 years down the road. You get to do whatever you want to do. This is not, obviously, this is where Apple is going, unless that is what you want to do. It could be something that nobody sees coming that you're like, that's where I want to see them land. What do you want 15 years from now?
I kind of want Star Trek. I want computing that is a part of the environment in which we live. And I guess you can say that home automation has started us down that road. But I don't want to think so much in terms of this is the Apple gadget that I buy. I buy a HomePod, I buy a Mac, I buy an iPhone. But I would like basically a computing environment that is seamless and gives me the ability to interact with my life, my home life, in computing terms, as much or as little as I want. So I don't want the computers to run everything, but I want them to be available to me to do the tasks that feel right to me. So there's certain things in automation that I really like and that I appreciate. And there are other things that I feel entirely capable of doing, like turning on light switches. It's just not that important to me that the light switch go on automatically, but it is important to me that at certain times of day, certain things happen because, they make sense. So I would just like that kind of automation to be sort of seamless and elegant, but again, controllable by the humans as opposed to controllable by the robots.
Does Apple have to build like a house for that? Does Apple have to build apartments for that? Because I have almost no home automation in my house because, well, I don't own my own home. I mean, that's really it. I mean, I've lived in apartments. I've lived in houses that I've rented. So, I mean, the idea of taking all this stuff and going someplace else with it, I mean, maybe that's really the thing, the difference between renting and owning, I suppose. Like, how does that kind of thing that you're talking about happen? Or are we going to leave that to future people to worry about? And you're just saying, that's where I want to go. Wake me up when we get there.
I kind of want little stickers or something that I can put where I want, because I don't want to live in a constructed, manufactured computing environment. I don't want to live inside of a computer, and I certainly don't want to feel like I have to buy from Apple or Google, and those are my choices. I mean,
right.
So I kind of want some metaphor that is not a function of whether I open up the walls and wire things or whether I have, wireless mesh routers every 5 feet or whatever. I don't know, tiles or stickers or something that allows me to, again, have as much or as little. I might have whole rooms of my house that aren't automated at all. That might be like my holodeck, like the unautomated room. Like you go in there and you have to do everything yourself. Whoa, it's so weird. I don't know, but I like the idea that you can have as much or as little control. And then we have conversations like this, and it's like, wait, you don't automate your kitchen in this certain way? Well, here's how I do it. And you're like, oh God, I would never do that. I still want to be able to have those conversations where individuals get to make choices about what feels right to them. But what Apple does is make the technology function seamlessly enough that I can sort of pick and choose my. It's like controlling the climate in your house, right? Some people like it warmer than others.
I kind of want to do like the thing from The Graduate. I got one word for you. Are you listening to me? Just one word. Nanobots.
See, there's certain ways that you can express that like start to make me go back on my ideas. Like, no, I don't want. No, the little creatures. I mean, we had a Roomba running around here at Christmas, and I'm not even sure about that. I actually really liked it, but at the same time, it was like it made me feel all sorts of ways about like this little machine running around my house, and the cats chasing it, and them chasing the cats, and the whole thing, which I'm not even sure is relevant to what we're discussing, except to the extent that I'm talking about facilitating different people's level of comfort with technology, because the one thing that these ecosystem-based solutions like Apple's or Google's or Amazon's do is they want you to have a lot of whatever that is they have to sell. It's natural. That's what they do. But I don't want my quality of life to be conditional on having all the things. I don't have a HomePod because they're expensive. Don't talk to me about the minis. I'm actually thinking about one of those. But I just don't have one. I don't want to feel as though, or I don't want to, in fact, live a life that is dependent on my having a particular piece of gear in order to access all of the other good things.